Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for attending this short training session. My name is Michael Benedict, and I'm one of the software analysts here at Blue Link. In the next 30 minutes or so, what we're going to do is share with you some of the tips that I've learned over the years, and maybe even provide you with some productivity improvements that might help you with your daily activities. What we're going to talk about today is using some of the shortcuts that we have, accessing screens and filtering of different panels. We're going to look at the shortcuts in the sales order screen. There are shortcuts that you may not know about that I thought might be useful for you guys. Recurring sales orders. Recurring sales orders are not just useful if you have customers that are going to be placing the exact same order with you every week, as an example, or every month. So we'll actually talk about that. And lastly, backorder fill. Again, one of those things where it's not used as much as it could be, I think. And I will talk to you a little bit about how that might be able to help you. And then at the end, there'll be actually some Q&A with some of the questions that you might have at the end. So before we get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my screen so that you can actually see Blue Link. And we're going to start going through some of those functions that I thought were most applicable for you. So the first thing that I want to do is mention that one of the things that I do in demonstrations, instead of actually, of course we have the pinned information you can actually have, or I can actually go and find them by using the menus down the sides. But I also like to minimize screens and then use the Windows screen here. What I feel that this does is when I'm opening this particular screen, for instance, the inventory, the lookup screen, it actually loads a bit quicker. So if you are one of these people that are using the same specific 3 or 4 or 2 screens all the time, instead of actually closing it and then needing to load a sales order screen as an example, go and look at using the minimizing and then the windows over here. There's a couple things that you'll see here. This is the quick inventory lookup. Not sure if you're familiar, but there's actually what we call a sort ascending and sort descending. And all this does is if you're in a specific column, and if I say sort ascending, oops, I missed it. If I say sort ascending, it's going to actually ascend or assort my descriptions per, in this particular case, ascending. If I say descending, it's going to actually be alphanumeric, of course, descending. So that's one thing. I can actually go in here, and if I'm using wildcards, allows me to enter in some specific information. And it doesn't have to be just one word. I can, for instance, go in here and say shirt, and I want it to be a white shirt that I'm looking at, and I want it to be a small. So what would happen here, and the system would actually allow me to see only those that returned all of this particular information. Blue Link will allow you to do this in any one of these types of panels that you're in. You can actually do searching in again, this is an inventory. You can do it in your sales orders, all that kind of information. If I go into, for instance, the customer lookup, one of the things that I do all the time is, again, looking at the top information here, just think about, using that wildcard if somebody is telling you what what their phone number is again. And then when I hit enter, it's going to actually populate that information. Again, a lot easier than trying to search through a whole bunch of companies and asking them specific information about that. Anytime that you see drop-down keys or little drop-down arrows along these different pieces of information, I reset this as an example, and if I go into this particular piece of information, I can actually use specific functions, and these are Microsoft functions, but functions that allow us to do things like contains that information. And again, using wildcards or specific filter information will allow you to do that. So you literally have the ability to use functions such as an and and an or. So I want this and that in a specific return, and it will actually provide you that information. One thing that was asked about in a previous question was how do we actually save panels? So we all should be aware that I can actually take a specific column and move that column to a different location on my screen. And what this will happen then is, I can actually see the different columns and set up in the different places. One of the things that, if you want to maintain it that way, you can actually go into what we call the choose details. These are all of the different columns that allow me to be seen or shown in this particular lookup. I can turn them on, I can turn them off, I can move them up and down if I wanted to. But once I get to what I want by hitting the save button, a little save here, it will actually save this layout for me as a user, Michael, for the next time that I open. If if Samantha is using this panel, if John is using this panel, they can actually set up their own files or their own fields the way they like it. And when they log in using their particular username and password, they'll actually be able to open that or see their layout. So let's go into a sales order, because I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the tips that I have found in a sales order. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to start off from a new order. There's a couple things that we can do to actually open a sales order. I can open a sales order, of course, from the customer's lookup screen. I can actually find it through a pin or from the order entry screen. There's a number of places that actually get to a sales order. But once I get into here, I can actually go, and I'm just going to use Backyard here. What we're going to do here is we're going to create an order from scratch, just to show you some of the different functions that you may or may not be aware that we can do. I believe it was starting from version 14. We can now actually do those wildcard searches here. So for instance, if I type in shirt, or star shirt, I should say, a wildcard shirt, it's going to bring back or return all of those products that have shirts in my inventory. So I'm going to actually just select that one, and I'm going to say that I want one of these as an example. I can also do the same thing when I'm doing a lookup for in my lookups. This gives me the ability to look up, again, using those wildcards in here. But one of the things that people might not be aware of is this might be a good place, or this is a good place to show or to look up products, almost like an inventory panel in the inventory lookup screen. But when you're on the phone with someone, they might say, well, if you don't have this, do you have that? So for instance, if I go into apparel and I'm going to actually just say shirt here, and let's assume that, and I'm just going to do a lookup. So we have many products that are shirts. I do have the ability to look at how many are on order or how many we have on hand of a specific shirt. So, and again, these can be moved the same way as that we actually did earlier in the system. But what I can do is tell the system or ask the system, if the customer doesn't have, if we don't have blue shirts, but they might want a different color shirts, you can actually then show how many of this particular, shirt that you have in a different color as an example. So for instance, the black small, we have 113. Just a little way to do it. And of course, I can actually type in here or in here as an example. I can go in here and do a filter for, shirt, black, small, as an example. And it's going to return those. And then it's as easy as saying, yes, the customer wants one of these, and I can return that to my order. So that's another way. And again, it's all about using those the wild cards in the system. Same idea can be done. I'm not going to even get into it too much, but the same idea can be done in your sales order history. These are all the products, of course, that the customer has bought from you. Be aware of information such as, one line per order or one line per product, or, all the lines. You can actually do that. But again, anytime that little arrow's there, I can actually do searching for this kind of thing also. While I'm in here, there's a number of F keys and function keys that might be applicable to you when you're using or in a sales order. So first of all, one of the things that you can do even in a sales order or any time is the F1 key. We should all know that Blue Link has actually, recently over the last number of years now, generated and have continually built our help files. These are really now quite sophisticated. They have training videos in them. They have step-by-step procedures on how to do a lot of information. If you're going through the training or the help at one point in time and you don't see specific information for something, let one of the Blue Link staff know. Send an email to support or to one of the operations people to actually let them know to help them update the help files. Okay. F3 notes. We all know about F3 notes for a specific customer. By hitting an F3, or I use the button, but hitting the F3 is going to populate this F button. But did you know that when I'm in a specific function, if I hit the Shift F2, it's going to open up the zoom, or it's what we call the zoom. It's going to open up to allow me to see everything in that panel. So I don't have to worry about missing something or scrolling down through the panel. I can see that in the system. Okay, Blue Link, internal to the system, has an F10 key for opening the packet container screen. We have an F12 key for warehouse shipping, just so that you know. Other alt keys that you might think that are important is, again, throughout the system, Alt-N is going to take a panel that's already been active, for instance, a sales order. But if I actually do an Alt-N as an example, it will save the information in the current panel and open a new one for me. Alt-X will actually just close that panel if I want to do that. So again, just a couple pieces of information to help you, looking when we're at the sales order side. One of the things that is important to me is that I use quite often is what we would call, or what we call the recurring sales orders. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to show you by going into order entry. If you scroll down, it's called recurring sales orders. Now, there's basically that I know of at least two sort of uses for recurring sales orders. Of course, we should all know that a recurring sales order could be used if a customer is placing the same quantities of products with us, week over week or month over month or year over year. If you're doing any leasing as an example and you're wanting to, have, or specific servicing of a particular product, or something that is that has to be billed monthly, by all means, recurring sales orders are great for that kind of thing. But also it's useful or potentially useful for if you have a group of products and those products, are going to always be bought by either the same company or a group of companies. A question came up is, can it be used by, can the same recurring sales order be used by multiple companies? 100% you can do that. So what I'm going to do here is just really quickly here, go into a customer. I'm going to actually create a recurring sales order for this particular customer. Now, this recurring sales order would be probably for the customer that buys the product from me all the time. So, you can see the information in here. I can enter in the location. And the same as on a sales order now, I can go through the system and enter in here the different products that they might be wanting to buy from, right? On a weekly or daily basis, as an example. And in your situation, pricing would automatically populate, or it should populate if you're setting up your system properly. This is demo data that I'm using, so you can imagine that not all of my customers have prices associated to them. So that's one thing. But if I go into the recurrences now, you'll be able to see that I can actually have this recurring set up for daily, every day as an example, or every weekday, or how many days that I want it to be spread. So I could actually say daily, every third day as an example. Or I could say weekly, and that weekly would be recurring how many weeks. Maybe it's one every week, or maybe it's every other week, and which specific day. In this case, it's Friday. Again, monthly is the same idea. Yearly could be the same idea. Now at the bottom here, there's a couple things that you'll see is the range of recurrence. The start date here is today's date, or the date that you would actually create this particular recurring sales order. And then that's the date that the system uses to determine when is the next recurrence. So in this particular case, it's going to use today's date, and the next recurrence, if it was, for instance, yearly, would be whenever we set up. May 22nd of next year, as an example, would be in the system. If it was monthly, and I said I wanted to be on the 28th of the month, as an example, then the next recurring order would be, the next recurring from today would be the 28th of, in fact, in this case, it would be the 28th of May, and then it would be the 28th of June, as an example. You can see here, is there no end date, meaning this is going to be forever until you turn it off. It could be a number of recurrences, or it could actually be an end by a specific time period. Anyway, just by saying okay here, I'm now able to save this, and it's in my recurring sales order system now. Okay, if I go into looking at the recurring sales order review screen now, this allows me to if I go into the recurring sales order review screens now, what you can see is that recurring sales order is at the bottom, but there's another one above that called miscellaneous customer. If you have that group of products that you're wanting to maintain over and over and over again, or reuse over and over again, and I'm just going to click on this to show you. This was one that I created earlier that would actually have a number of products. The pricing I just actually identified as 0, and I just created a bogus customer or a miscellaneous customer in the system. But when I actually use this as a recurring order in the system, I will be able to change the miscellaneous customer, or whatever you want to call them, to a specific customer in the system. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So this is a miscellaneous customer for a whole bunch of products in the system. There is no specific quantity set to them or specific prices. However, by going in recurring sales order review, this is going to allow me to select, this is going to allow me to select this one or any of the other ones in the system. And when I actually generate sales orders, it's going to actually generate a recurring sales order for that. Now, Blue Link does have generate recurring sales orders, and this is where it would automatically generate recurring sales orders for any of those orders that were generated up to and through this particular date. So for instance, it would actually generate a report for, or a new sales order for this one for May 11th, or May 12th. There's another one for May 12th. It would generate all those. The one for May 21st, it would have generated also. So just be aware when you're doing that, it will automatically populate when we're using that one. But in this case, I'm going to use the generate sales order. I'm going to say generate. Now, if I go to the sales order review screen, it's going to be the last one on. It's going to be the last one in my order. You can just double click on this, and you can see that this is actually for that generic customer. But I now have the ability in here to select which customer I want. Now, I could have actually used a wildcard in here again if I wanted to, but I could actually now say Atlanta Bread. Yep, I know. Right? You will probably, unless you already have it by default, set up the shipping location as an example. What I wanted to show you now is that you have an order already set up in the system. There is no quantities available or entered into the system. The prices are per this particular customer. And all I have to do, if you're in a situation where you're getting orders from your customers all the time, just basically go down through the list now and enter the ones that they want. Okay, and now the sales order is set for them. The other ones, of course, you could actually remove them, but what will happen is if you're only shipping these particular products, of course, the other ones are going to go to back orders, and hopefully you're aware that you can actually go into, for instance, the review screen and remove all of those that might be back ordered to zero if you wanted to be able to do that. So that is the sort of the recurring sales orders functionality that I wanted to talk to you about. So there were a couple questions that I wanted to talk to you about that have come up. The first one I think that I already answered is it safe to use a recurring sales order as a template? The answer is 100% yes. The only thing that you should think about is, what do you want on that specific product or that specific sales order? The easiest way that I found is to create that miscellaneous customer to actually generate that way. Another question that came up is, can you use a recurring sales order for non-customer in a non-customer specific way? I think I already answered that question. So one of the things in the sales order that we're going to talk about now is pre-booking and then the back order fill. So many customers, especially if they're seasonal, have orders that get pre-booked. And one of the things that Blue Link has been able to do, again, if I go into, I closed it, but if I go into my sales order, my review screen, just so I want to pick the right one, you'll notice here that there are orders that are in the system that are pre-booked. For instance, this particular pre-booked order. So if I double click on this and go into this particular order, you'll see that the details are all units on back order. So how did that happen without me needing to actually go in there and make that happen? As part of Blue Link's setup, as part of the system permissions in the system, you can actually tell the system that a specific order type, in my case, pre-book, will automatically push products, even if they're in inventory, to a back order status. And that's exactly what happened here. So they've actually been, put to pre-book, which is now back order. This is really useful if the order is not going to be needed to be filled, for instance, until later. This could actually be 11/27/20. It could actually be filled now, and therefore it's going to still be maintained in the system, but it's on back order, and it will actually take into consideration if you're needing to do ordering, that kind of stuff. It will actually use that in the ordering process. So in the order details, you can actually see that. Now, the neat thing about this is once the product comes in and you're wanting to fill this particular scenario or this particular order, it's as easy as going to fill back orders, pushing the button, and Blue Link will automatically move any available inventory and allocate it to this order. And now, if I go back to the sales order review screen, or if I can now process this order because it's going to actually be 100% fillable. Okay. The other button here, move to units on back order, is in a situation, is in a scenario where think that you actually do have some orders, but the customer says, you know what, just put this, just hold this order for me for a couple weeks or a week or whatever. I can actually take those products and I can move them all to back order. So it's actually going to be moving anything that's on this order that's been allocated or that could be allocated to back order. So it's again using that particular situation where it's actually moving availability and allocation of products to back order or not, using the back order fill and the remove from back order. So one of the questions that came up is Blue Link capable of having a separate pre-booked or our future order column? The answer is no, not at this time. If you are needing that, if it's really important for you to have that type of functionality, first of all, we would need to know what the specific reason was, just because we want to make sure that we understood what your reasoning was for that type of functionality. But this would be custom that you would have to actually get developed in the system to do that kind of thing. I'm just looking through here to see if there's any other specific questions that I did not answer or was not able to answer. So I think that I was able to answer all questions. There are a couple, there's two more at the bottom here that I want to just address. One of them, is there a place to view what all the F buttons do? So in Blue Link, we do have some F buttons. I think that I told you about them. It's one of those things where it's not, a big, huge list of F keys, but there are some, that you should be familiar with. For instance, the F3 key or the F 8 key, that kind of stuff will actually allow you to use that kind of functionality. The last one here that I see is there a way to keep canceled sales orders in the system? There is a deleted orders report available and the available, so there is a deleted orders report available, and the ability to see what's on a sales order, can be actually done through review changelog. But Blue Link does not allow you to take a deleted order and bring it back to life, for a better word. Okay. So I hope this was able to help you a little bit. If you have any questions of what we talked about today, if you have any topics that you'd like to hear about or see a demo on, please let us know. Thank you.